Get him. Get him. You got him? I hope you got him. There was a fly buzzing around this room, and now hopefully there's not. Anyway, hi, I'm Chloe Sky. I suffer from chronic fatigue, and I love shrimps. I want to talk about a simple wish, or at least a very niche part of it. There's a particular detail that had the tendency to make me steer clear of this film as a child. They turned that dog into a lady, back into a dog, and why? This is just one of those things that I think about way too much, like the physicality of it. And I know magic rules, so I can't exactly dissect what I'm looking at here. But here I am, being empathetic and putting myself in place of a long-haired chihuahua that I believe could have possibly been adopted with intention to be turned into a henchman. And I would now like to take the time to explore and possibly answer the questions. Why is this the person she turned into? Where did Boots come from? If you are so powerful a magic wielder that you could turn a dog into a lady, why wouldn't you just turn the dog into a bigger dog? Like, was that necessary? So come on. Jump in with me. We begin this strange ass 1997 movie starring Mara Wilson just outside her Matilda era. Plotline begins. There's this guy, Murray, who takes the test to be a fairy godmother. There is indeed sexism afoot because he's the only guy who goes for this career and succeeds. He causes a lot of disaster to happen, but ends up being the only guy who could save the day against evil magic lady, this is what I actually want to get into. Evil magic lady is introduced as Claudia, and alongside her is her loyal sidekick, Boots. Boots is a woman who was just a dog, until Claudia decided that she needed help, or for someone really obedient and a little dumb to do her bidding. And Boots, albeit loyal and a little dumb, did not deserve the partnership that presented itself upon her. I made an oopsie and basically wrote my whole first draft based on just my memory of this movie, which don't do that. Future me, don't do that. And at first I did not realize that Boots is actually Claudia's dog. Though after some troubleshooting and conversations with my circle, that did bring more valid questions to light. So, because I liked Mara Wilson and kind of wanted to be her a lot as a kid so much, there was a period where I gave this movie many a try. It was a VHS that my household owned, and I really liked the idea of having a fairy godmother. And I distinctly remember misunderstanding the situation as a kid. I didn't realize Boots was a dog at all. I just thought she was an eccentric magic lady. I guess I was too young to understand the adult dialogue. I could only focus on being Mara Wilson. I thought Boots was cursed into being like an eccentric magic lady that was just like had to do Claudia's bidding or something like that. And at the end was turned into a dog by Murray, which I was like, yeah, that checks. The lesser evil of the two villains now gets to live the glamorous life of a house dog. Yeah, best outcome. However, 'twas not the case. Upon revisiting this information, I found that indeed a dog went through human changes and got turned back into its original form, which had to have been the most comfortable outcome. And then upon revisiting this information, I realized that the likeliness in which this dog was adopted by our witch in question is staggering. My son is gonna get that fly. He promises. There is a painting within Claudia's house that we only see for a moment, and I couldn't find any images of like the actual painting in full view, only like the little corner. But the dog and the artwork is definitely Boots. And I believe the person whose lap she's sitting in and who's holding her has to be Claudia because given that the kidnappees, the little girl and fairy godmother, were brought to Claudia's house, it would be really strange for them to like bring them to like the magic headquarters because that's where you would most likely get caught immediately. But that begs the question of how long would you own a pet before commissioning someone to paint a portrait with you and said pet to hang in your fancy 90s decorated Manhattan mansion. Now, Claudia is not a nice woman. I'm assuming she faked it till she made it as a fairy godmother and then decided that she hated kids and switched to witch. It's been a year since the last fairy godmother event, which she wants to take her revenge. If that is indeed her in the painting with boots, then I am led to believe in a few theories. What I think is most likely is when Claudia got kicked out of the fairy godmother club, she got a dog because she was sad and lonely and wanted companionship. She went all out, got the painting made, but then based on how she actually treats Boots throughout the movie, it turns out she's not a dang dog person either. So as the timeline goes, she has an ice cream phase of depression. She gets the dog, then somewhere around 6 months later gets the painting done, then has a month or two of hatching the evil plan. By the time the celebration comes around again, Boots is a human henchman for what I assume is like less than 2 weeks. And how? Why? Was Claudia literally like, oh, who would make a good henchman? My dog? What the hell? Thus is what led me to a plethora of questions, a lot of what ifs, if you what if will, lifespan questions. If Boots had remained a human, would she have lived a human span of time? Or would she have lived a dog span of time? Like, Claudia gets trapped in the mirror, Boots gets turned back into a dog. Does that increase her time for any reason? Like, what's the magic behind that? What's the math behind that? Say like Boots the dog was 3. Wouldn't that make the person like 21? Ha! You know, because dog years. Actually, if I go by the actress's age at the time of filming, getting technical here, that would make the dog about 5.5. So if she had her for what I can assume is just about a year or so, where did she come from before that? Like, I doubt there was much of an age jump. It's not like the dog was 1 and then became a mid-30s human. Did she pick her up from the pound? Did she find her as a stray? That I doubt. I think she got the dog as a means of like her own pick-me-up. The chances of her running into a random dog to take care of seems unlikely. I definitely think she would have gone with the pound route. Also, Boots' name is a little telling because Claudia would not have named her Boots. She would have named her something like Duchess or Star or something like that. So I'm thinking she already came with the name and was a tad too old, 5, to really learn a new one. And would she just have to live the rest of her life as a human? That's the movie I want. A once dog learning how to be a human. Like if Boots weren't changed back at the end. Is that what she wanted or what she thought she wanted, led on by Claudia? To be a witch's sidekick or to be a witch herself? After all, she definitely does admire Claudia, and Claudia still let her pee outside? Potty training a grown adult who used to be a dog has got to be very difficult. Like, you go your entire life so far as a dog, peeing on the ground, and suddenly you have to learn how to use a freaking toilet? That's wild. That's a no from me. However, that is luckily not the case. There is a scene where Boots is doing the potty dance, and Claudia asks her, what's wrong? She says she has to pee, and Claudia is like, we were just outside. Meaning that she actually did let her pee on the ground. Because I can't imagine an ex-fairy godmother / witch has time to toilet train a lady. But all that to say that Boots did not consent to becoming a person. Like, Claudia could have looked that Chihuahua in the eyes and been like, do you want to be a people? And I doubt Boots would have understood exactly what she was committing to as a dog. Of course, once she was human, it was likely explained to her, and she was ready to continue being a loyal companion. But that showcases how effed up Claudia is as a character. Evil villain, am I right? So after overthinking all the questions based on my latest obtaining of info, I decided to research several matters of this facet. I jumped into a bit of a rabbit hole and noticed there's a trend and quite a bit of history of turning women into creatures or animals, as well as a few other sides of metamorphosis that didn't need magic to turn one thing into another, or lack thereof. And now that I have completed my research by revisiting A Simple Wish, I would like to report back to you on the specifics of this poor dog woman dog, and try really, really hard not to think about Full Metal Alchemist. Edward. I did this to myself. I put it in the script. I read it every time. Miniature confession. I have never seen Full Metal Alchemist because of that one scene. Actually, I think that's the only episode of that show that I ever have seen. And yeah, that's probably not the episode you should start with when starting a new anime. Anyway, Edward. I think about that too much. Moving on. Y'all ever hear of the Wampus Cat? No? Cool. This is a painting I made for my cryptid-loving girlfriend's birthday. Here is my depiction of the Wampus Cat, which is a legend about a woman who gets turned into like a half lady, half puma creature with like 6 limbs for eavesdropping on a tribal ritual. Here's another depiction. And another. Imagine that coming at you in the middle of the woods, in the middle of the night, in the middle of your dreams. So even like as far as the early 1900s, half-lady animals were reported and documented and becoming urban legends. But an even further back example of creature bending that I find surprising, and without even any magic, it's just what a lot of people collectively think, the depiction of angels in literature and lore. It was just collective knowledge via storytelling, given that not a lot of people could read, that angels were described as winged people. When it was brought to light that biblically accurate angels were depicted as a bunch of eyes with wings, everyone was like, nah, actually, we'll keep our sexy angels that look like people, thanks. And they did just that and continued with their regular artwork and churchy stuff. Thanks, Da Vinci. So for a long time, there was this idea to change something into something else via magic or the power of word. Even in Full Metal Alchemist, 2 things are combined to create a horrible monstrosity. There was the eavesdropper that got turned into a monster. There were the angels that were too uggo in their original form, that people purposely depicted them inaccurately. And then there was a little girl and a family dog who did absolutely nothing but have a very sick father. Edward. These are all examples of something turning into something else, though none of these examples have the resolve of becoming its original form once it's had its period of being its respective creature. And none of these examples started out as a lapdog and turned human. This prompted me to stick my hand back into the worm bucket and again think about the physicality. Through no fault of your own, you are born a dog. You are adopted by a witch. And then via magic you metamorphosize into a whole person? Like a whole other species, just like it's another Tuesday? Yeah, well, what about body hair? Did it all just turn into skin? Did it disappear? And your bones, what the hell, your bones? Chihuahua bones have got to be so much more fragile than human bones. Do those bones just change via magic? All the science of human and dog differences. Dog mouth. Does the bacteria just change and switch to human mouth? There's way too many layers to this onion. So I had to go back in with the realization that I didn't actually answer any of my questions. Like, yeah, here's examples of witches turning people into frogs. I can even think of a witchier example of a creature being turned into a human, but I think that's more of a result of too much magic. The Last Unicorn. Lady Amalthea was turned into a human to hide her because she was the last unicorn. I'm actually going to make a whole video about that movie eventually. I watched it a lot as a kid and I would like to revisit it as an adult. But then, for accuracy's sake, there's an example of specifically a fairy godmother, the notorious one from Cinderella, who turned a whole crew of mice and other animals into either people or horses, and that was a little closer. And not to mention that's the fairy godmother territory. So I feel like the magic is a little bit more aligned. It's not alchemy, it's not the power of word. It is for sure bibbidi bobbidi dog magic. Why is that a brand amongst fairy godmother community? I do not know. Let's stay on track here. In Cinderella, it benefited the heroine that her mice friends got turned into the various parts of a horse-drawn carriage. In The Last Unicorn, Amalthea got turned into a human to hide her because it would be pretty dangerous for a white glowing magical horned horse to be walking around during the daytime. What benefit did Claudia have for turning Boots into a person? Details on obedience. I looked up the obedience chart for Chihuahuas, and as it turns out, starting them with training as a puppy is preferred, and if you try to late train a Chihuahua, you may as well not do it. They like to run the show. They're not particularly people-pleasing dogs. They normally attach to just 1 or 2 people, which is why they can be like all cuddly and loving with some, but with others, they're almost demonic appearing. My grandparents had Chihuahuas back whenever they were alive and I was a child. And let me tell you, Chi-Chi and Cha-Cha ran that household. They signal for whenever they needed to go to the bathroom. They were attended to. They got treats whenever they wanted. They got table food. They got the princess bath treatments, everything. However, maybe that's just part of Boots' personality. That certainly comes out in her human form. She's just a dog who wants to be a good dog, like every dog. Like when she realizes that perhaps she's doing the wrong thing, like, hey, maybe I shouldn't be siding with this evil lady that kind of abuses me, and tries to use Claudia's wand against her. This, of course, is what gets Boots turned back into a dog, but it also answers the question of why is this the person that Boots turned into? Like just some really nice lady who wants to stay loyal to who she's thinking is taking care of her. And if it is Claudia's dog, we can also assume that she dressed her up in this style like she would normally do, and thus this layered character is what results. And now that we've asked and looked into possible questions for the where and who, I'm still left with a very large why. Okay, you are a magical being. You were a fairy godmother. You are now a witch. You are so powerful a witch that, without a wand, mind you, you can turn a chihuahua into a grown person to do your bidding. Now this person is more sweet than smart, and all throughout the length of a movie, you have many complaints that your dog woman doesn't know what to do in every scenario. You say you like it better when she was a dog. So why did you turn her into a person? Brought back to my circle for advice, I was given the perspective of making of the movie and how it was likely dramatically cheaper to just say this woman got turned into a dog via magic instead of CGIing a talking dog companion, you know, for the sake of the movie. They had to use all the special effects money for the magic purple spinning glitter. But I wanted to stick with the idea of Claudia as a character and analyze her doings of a witch without a coven. Sure, she needed a henchman, but instead of hiring someone, she decided she could already benefit from the loyalty of her lapdog. So I thought more about Claudia and realized what an impulsive magic caster she is. And it made me really wonder if this had ever been the plan at all, or more like the result of a convenient accident. Like, I don't think she ever adopted a dog with the intention to turn it into a henchman. I think she was genuinely lonely, and a dog is a pretty good companion if you're willing to take the steps to take care of it. Claudia wasn't, and was more interested in the glamour of having a lapdog. When that fizzled out, maybe she got mad, as we see her do several times during the movie, and that anger causes a spell directed at Boots, and that turned her into a lady. And Claudia was like, great, now I don't need to hire a henchman. Turns out all along it wasn't a question of, was that necessary? It was a question of, was that on purpose? In my original draft, I went on a tangent about the dogs from Swiss Family Robinson taking on a tiger and winning. I wondered about the concept of Boots becoming a bigger dog, like a Rottweiler, and how that would be a shorter movie because a big dog wouldn't stand for the abuse too long. Also, towards the end, Boots claimed that she was promised witchhood by Claudia. I believe this was told to her in lieu of her probably freaking out and becoming a human. And she admired Claudia so much that of course she believed that this was the reason that this had to have been done. And she would be rewarded for all of her hard work, when in reality, Claudia was like, why aren't you a human? Zap. And then she was. She made this dog a lady, dressed her in clothes and shoes, teased her hair, and promised to make her a witch. And the most evil tragedy of all is she knew she would never keep that promise. At the end, the disaster woman Claudia is trapped forever in her own mirror. Boots and Murray are walking like they're about to have the best adventure, even though she was his enemy for a bit. Like, she has the best outcome for the rest of her life, and I highly doubt she will ever have to be a person again. Seems a real good thing for the fact she's at the very least no longer participating in person/witch related activities. Which, considering that one of my original questions from my first draft was, what's better, being a human or dog? I gotta say that, at least for Boots at Murray's side, it's definitely a dog's life for her. But yeah, dog magic. Conclusively, I had a lot of fun looking into all of this, especially my mini dive on the lore. Isn't it interesting how you don't need magic, you just need art, education, and time to change something? That's nuts. I think that's enough dog lady talk for one day, and I believe I've said everything that I wanted to say about this. So, a very special thank you to my count 'em, 4 subscribers. I invite you to now like and subscribe, comment if that's your thing, all that good stuff. I've been Chloe Sky, and I love you. I gotta go kiss my cats on their tiny little foreheads. Okay, bye. Mwah.